Greetings, California, Nevada Annual Conference. I'm Kristen Stone King, Chair of the Conference Council on Finance and Administration and pastor of Epworth United Methodist Church in Berkeley. Psalm 46, from which our annual conference theme of "And Know That I Am God" is drawn, begins in a place of praise and affirmation, then moves on to confident gratitude and ends with steadfast hope. Today, as I share about the work of the Council on Finance and Administration, I'll do as the Psalm does by beginning with praise and affirmation, moving on to gratitude, and ending with hope. The Council on Finance and Administration operates on behalf of the annual conference to determine what resources are needed to fulfill the vision for ministry and mission in Cal Nevada, and then works with the bishop, cabinet, core team, districts, circuits, local churches, and other conference agencies to make sure that needed resources are available. We administer the conference self-insurance program, guide the conference audit, contribute to the work of the conference personnel committee, and champion our progress each year toward making a full 100% contribution to our shared ministries as a denomination. And now, for the third year in a row, you have achieved a 100% contribution to our general and jurisdictional apportionments. Congratulations on this faithful and tremendous accomplishment. After years of contributing less than 2/3 of our share, quadrennium over quadrennium, we are now celebrating a three-peat of 3 years in a row of 100% giving. Great work, Cal Nevada! Just look at how far we've come. In the quadrennium 2005 to 2008, we gave only 59.6%. The next quadrennium, from 2009 to 2012, we dropped to 57.5%. Last quadrennium, we supported general and jurisdictional ministries at 64.2% of our share. For 2 out of the 3 of the last quadrenniums, we had the lowest giving of any annual conference in the United States. And in the third quadrennium of those 3 quadrenniums, only one other conference beat us to the bottom. And now, for the first 3 years of this quadrennium, 2017, 2018, and 2019, we have given 100%. Give yourselves a hand, Cal Nevada. You are so appreciated. Like so many other aspects of our ministry, 2020 has been a particularly challenging year for your CFA due to the impacts of COVID-19. As our church buildings closed and worship moved online, we have monitored the state of the conference financial picture, meeting as a council and in task forces much more often than a typical year. Diane Knudsen has led 2 conference webinars on the payroll protection program and worked with multiple churches individually to make sure this needed support was secured. In this compromised environment, tithing income has suffered and is currently down for the conference as a whole about 13% from where it was last year. And yet for many churches, tithing has been maintained at 2019 levels or has even increased. Just as the Apostle Paul celebrated the generosity of the Macedonian church in 2 Corinthians, saying that they gave voluntarily of their means and even beyond their means, we celebrate those churches that are able to give and go an extra mile. I'm grateful to be able to report to you that due to this generosity, holding the line on spending, and the PPP grant that was secured for the conference, we are still on track to fulfill 100% of our general and jurisdictional commitments this year, which would mean that we would end 2020 with 100% giving for the full quadrennium. Will you help us get there? We know that many churches are suffering and experiencing financial declines. We know that our siblings across the conference are facing evacuations, dislocations, and great need due to fire, as well as health challenges from COVID. But there are always ways to be creative, to raise awareness about the impact of our conference tithe, and to recognize God's abundance. I believe that if we share, we will have what we need to do the work that God has called us to do in the conference, in the Western jurisdiction, and in the United Methodist Church. This is the power of the connection in action as churches who have more give more, and we partner with conferences around the globe to show up in the most needed places. I could not be more humbled and pleased to serve with such a great CFA team made up of 14 voting members, 6 clergy, and 8 lay persons, as well as non-voting members who are on the council by virtue of role, including Bishop Carcano, Conference Lay Leader Michelle Pope, the Executive Director of Finance and Administration Diane Knudsen, Director of Connectional Ministries George Dominguez, and a District Superintendent as designated by the Cabinet. Currently, DS Deborah Brady serves as the Cabinet Representative to CFA. You are all so appreciated. Let's continue now with gratitude. Appreciation is due to every single one of you, and there are some among us whom I want to thank specifically for the inspiration they offer to all of us. First, the table at Central UMC in Sacramento. Established as a new church start in 2010, the table was not expected to tithe in its first 5 years. But in 2014, 1 year ahead of schedule, the table began to work toward the tithe. At that point, the church committed to increase its tithe giving by 2% each year, achieving a full tithe plus 3.3% in 2018 for 10.3% of giving. Through the ups and downs of being a new church, the church has remained faithful to the giving plan. In 2019, as the table grew, their tithe grew as well, increasing another 22%. Thank you to Pastors Matt Smith and Linda Duhirsu for your fantastic leadership. St. Luke's Richmond. Despite having major building issues, St. Luke's UMC gave 11.4% of their tithe, plus second mile giving. Being a Tongan pastor, Pastor Ofa Haunga taught the congregation the importance of giving by sharing the Tongan culture of missionale. Today, all members, including those who are not Tongan, participate in missionale in the celebration of the church. Christ Church, UMC, Santa Rosa. Pastor Lindsay Belker has taught the congregation the value of connectional ministries by involving the church in shared circuit ministries. These ministries included marching in a pride parade and holding circuit-wide workshop trainings. As a result, for the first time in many years, Christ UMC has given a full tithe plus second mile giving. Oakdale Community United Methodist Church and Riverbank First. When Pastor Jeffrey Holder was appointed to Oakdale Community UMC and Riverbank First, these churches began to move toward a full tithe. DS Deborah Brady reports, under Pastor Jeffrey's guidance, there has been a shift in attitude among the church leaders that tithing is just something they do. One thing that helped is that the Central Valley District Union and its predecessor Extension Society challenged churches to focus on evangelism, discipleship, and revitalization with a grant of $5,000 a year for 3 years for any new program or initiative. Then they upped the ante to encourage full tithing. If the church participated fully in the conference tithe, they could get $7,500 a year. And if they also did the extra mile giving in full, they could get $10,000 a year. So this motivated many churches to pay attention. Thank you to Pastor Jeffrey Holder and the Central Valley District Union for this creative and faithful leadership. Next, Wesley UMC in Bakersfield. Wesley UMC is one of a handful of churches that has tithed in full every single year since we started the conference tithe in 2014. Thanks to the leadership of Pastor Ann Schlesinger and her predecessors, an effort nearly 20 years ago to break down the apportionment items into small bites and then recruit members to adopt that item for 6 months or a year moved the church quickly to paying in full. Focused and creative efforts can have a huge and lasting impact. Gratitude is also due to our bishop and appointed cabinet who work tirelessly throughout each year to support churches and pastors in understanding the importance of the tithe and how to achieve it. Thanks to each of you. And now let's end with hope. As your Conference Council on Finance and Administration, our goal is to operate with collaboration, transparency, and faithfulness, modeling in our intentions and actions the transformed church and world we all long for. Last year, we introduced to you a new budget format that showed not just tithing income, but income from other sources. This new format gave a fuller picture of all the financial activity in the conference. By utilizing stored funds, reserve funds, short-term campaigns, and reducing some spending, we have been able to add to your faithful tithing to meet all of our budgeted commitments for the last 3 years. This year, as we came together in February to begin our work on the 2021 budget proposal, we expected general and jurisdictional apportionments to decrease by at least 18% due to proposed legislation for the 2020 General Conference. As we anticipated those decreases, our budget creation work was much easier than it's been in the past. But General Conference hasn't happened yet, and GCFA gave instruction that the General Church must continue with the budget that was passed last quadrennium as we move into 2021. Our job of creating a 2021 budget then got a lot harder. And as we worked through different scenarios over the last several months, we determined that we cannot count on a general church apportionment reduction for 2021. It's possible that the General Conference would pass reductions and make them retroactive, and some other conferences are counting on this in their budget plans for next year. But if there's one thing that this pandemic has taught us, it's this. We must make decisions on what we know to be true today, not on what we imagine would happen in the future. So we are presenting to you a budget proposal for 2021 that remains balanced, continues the practice of income transparency through the alphabetical code shown to the right of the income sources, holds expected tithing income at 2020 levels for a total of $6 million, and reduces expenses through all categories except connectional expenses, which have increased just 1.9%. The proposed budget from CFA for 2021 can be found on the annual conference section of the conference website with the other recommendations, and it is item 1, showing last year's actual spending, the budget for our current year of 2020, and what we are recommending for next year. If you would like to see the balances of each asset account held by the conference, some of which are utilized by this proposed budget and indicated with the corresponding code, you can find that on the conference website under Offices, Finance and Administration, Net Asset Report. We'll return to the 2021 budget recommendation on Saturday morning for a time of questions and answers, discussion, followed by a vote. As always, I welcome your feedback throughout the year on the matters before CFA. I said that we'd end with hope, and you may be wondering, what's so hopeful about a budget that holds income projections at last year's levels and reduces spending? Well, for one, I'd say that any budget that is balanced and represents a tremendous amount of mission and ministry accomplished for the transformation of the world is a place of hope. But I'm also finding hope in a shift in the way that we are now doing our work in the CFA. The reckoning on racism for our country and church, intensified by George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis in May, but sparked in 2013 when Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi organized around the prophetic truth that Black Lives Matter, must transform every dimension of how we live together. We know that one of the places that racism lives is in our structures and systems. To root out this insidious sin, CFA has committed to taking a racial justice lens to all that we do. To this end, we worked with the cabinet to determine if any of our churches of color were experiencing challenge from banks in obtaining funds for the payroll protection program, knowing that the history of banking in this country is rife with racism. We have created a task force to investigate moving a percentage of conference liquid assets to Black-owned financial institutions, and we are reading to educate ourselves about other ways we can be proactive. As a country and as a church, we are confronted with many challenges right now, but we are facing them. And because of this, I have hope. I have hope because my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. The one who came to us as us, who suffers with us through all seasons, and leads us into all justice and peace, is our hope. We have been promised nothing less than the kingdom of heaven on earth. That is my hope.